Well, it's time to finish a series that I started last year, because we're in the end game now. Hello everyone, my name is Ryan Cam, and welcome to my review for Ant-Man. This movie was directed by Peyton Reed, and it stars Paul Rudd, Michael Douglas, Michael Pena, Evangeline Lilly, and Corey Stoll. It tells the tale of Scott Lang, played by Paul Rudd, who just got released from prison. He really wants to see his daughter again, but his ex-wife is not entirely pleased to see him, and her new boyfriend is not exactly a big fan either. Simply put, he needs a lot of money. So he breaks into this old house, which just so happens to be owned by Dr. Hank Pym, played by Michael Douglas. Dr. Pym takes Lang under his wing because he actually needs him for something involved with his own company, which has been corporately taken over by Darren Cross, played by Corey Stoll. Cross is making technology that Dr. Pym is not exactly fond of, and he wants to put a stop to it. So Dr. Pym, Lang, and Dr. Pym's daughter, played by Evangeline Lilly, must begrudgingly team up to take the technology before it falls into the wrong hands. When this movie was coming out, there was a lot of controversy surrounding it. Not by any of the cast or anything. There was a lot of controversy surrounding the director's chair, because this movie was originally supposed to be directed by Edgar Wright. For those not familiar, Edgar Wright is probably one of the best, most least talked about directors working today. Some of his most famous work includes the Three Flavors of Cornetto trilogy, which I believe to be his masterpiece, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Wright left the project about halfway done, and the creative reins were then handed to this movie's director, Peyton Reed. Reed was basically a maintenance director. He basically patched everything up and made sure everything looked okay. But for a maintenance director, Reed sure did a great job, because Ant-Man surprisingly was very enjoyable. A lot more than I thought I would. Because honestly, I hadn't seen the first Ant-Man since it came out in theaters. But then I watched it again, I'm like, whoa, this is surprisingly really good. First of all of the actors do a fantastic job. You got Paul Rudd, who is absolutely hysterical just throughout his career. He's been excellent in movies like The 40-Year-Old Virgin. But here, he kind of plays the straight man with a very funny edge. And he does a great job. Even though he was in prison for a crime that he did commit, you kind of tell that he has a bit of a heart of gold. I mean, he's trying to see his daughter. I mean, what hard-hearted person wouldn't like that? And when he needs to be funny, he can be funny, because he's Paul Rudd, and he's really funny. You also have Michael Douglas, who legitimately has been an amazing actor for decades at this point. I mean, everybody knows him for the likes of, like, Wall Street and all that, but here he does a great job as well. One of the highlights of the movie was the chemistry between he and Evangeline Lilly. They have a very strained relationship, and the movie does a great job of showing that. It's not, ooh, you know, they hate each other. Like, they don't say, like, I hate you out loud. Like, there's actually palpable tension. And the movie does a great job of actually showing it and not just outright saying it. When they do have that moment where they finally kind of make up, not totally make up, but kind of put their differences aside to help out the present situation, it's one of the best scenes in the movie. Also, this movie has some really good action sequences. Just take a look at the Ant-Man train sequence on YouTube. You won't be led astray. There's this one moment in the movie where Ant-Man and Yellow Jacket are fighting each other, and they get into the backyard of this house. Ant-Man becomes big again, and Yellow Jacket is still small. So Ant-Man grabs his ping pong racket, and he pongs him off the racket and into a bug zapper. Now, what makes this funny is the sound that is made afterwards, because you hear and you hear the suit go. So what you're basically hearing is On the ground, grab the racket. I gotta admit, I laughed way too hard at that. But this movie was not perfect. There were some things that I just wasn't a fan of, both in terms of the movie and in terms of hindsight. Let me explain. The most annoying thing about this movie had to be the constant references to the Avengers. I mean, yeah, we get it. Avengers Age of Ultron happened before this movie. It's like, yes, we know. The Avengers exist. You don't have to tell us. I will admit it was pretty cool when Scott actually said the Avengers in a conversation, just to kind of establish like, ooh, everything's connected. That was pretty cool. But when an entire action scene takes place at the Avengers headquarters in upstate New York, that's a bit much for me. It especially isn't fun when you have Falcon jobbing out to an Avenger that we barely even know. Falcon was basically made to look like a fool because he was essentially beat by, someone that big. Now, granted, he would get bigger and smaller, but, still. I mean, why you gotta do Falcon like that? However, this movie was released in 2015, which meant that the MCU wasn't as widely appreciated as a lot of other people, and there was a need to kind of punch in the fact that the MCU is all connected, In 2019, we all know this by now, but back in 2015, it was like everything had to be explained. That part of it just didn't really age well for me. But the most egregious thing in this movie, and it's really not even that egregious to begin with, is Darren Cross. I thought he was just an incredibly generic villain. He was like Obadiah Stane from Iron Man, just with no goatee. Well, now that I think about it, a lot of the plot of this movie is similar to Iron Man. And that Pym was pushed out because Cross wanted to establish more weapons-based technologies and Pym did not. Just like Stark was almost pushed out of the company because Stane wanted to create more weapons-based technology for them. Coincidence? I don't think so. This kind of tinfoil hat stuff really didn't bother me all that much though, because I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed Ant-Man. Sure, it's kind of familiar in that MCU formula kind of way, but a lot of the action scenes were very creative, the acting was very good. On the whole, I'm going to give it a great rating. It's not my favorite movie in the MCU, but when people say like, oh, Ant-Man's one of the lesser MCU movies, I'm like, no. It's not perfect, but it certainly is not Thor 2 or Iron Man 2. At least it had, a personality to it. Do I think that Edgar Wright's version of Ant-Man would have been better? I mean, I guess. But at the same time, if he were to be locked up in the MCU, then that would have meant that he wouldn't have had time to make Baby Driver. And that would have been a national tragedy. But that's all for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry this review is incredibly late. When I initially started this MCU series, I had the promise of reviewing every MCU movie leading up to Infinity War. And that obviously didn't happen because final exams got in the way and I was graduating college at the time and ironing some stuff out, and I'm sure you can understand that. But I'm going to finish the series this time in honor of Avengers Endgame. I thankfully only have a couple more movies to review after Ant-Man. I only have Civil War, Doctor Strange, and Guardians 2 and Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I think that's it. I've already reviewed all of Phase 1 and 90% of Phase 2, and I've already covered Spider-Man Homecoming, Black Panther, Thor Ragnarok, and Infinity War when it came out. So all I've got to do is those 4 movies that I mentioned earlier, and Endgame, eventually when it comes out. But if you liked this video, please be sure to leave a like, and if you want to check out my other thoughts on the other MCU movies, click here. The playlist link will be in the left-hand corner. Or if you want to subscribe to catch more videos, please click right around here. My name is Ryan Kem, and I'll see you in the next one.